Mark Jensen stood on his roof, admiring the newly installed solar panels gleaming in the morning sun. At 42, the environmental engineer had finally achieved his dream of energy independence. 6 months of paperwork, 3 contractor quotes, and a significant chunk of his savings had culminated in this moment. He snapped a photo to send to his daughter at college. She'd been the one who'd inspired his green journey after bringing home a dire climate change report 3 years ago. "Looks good, neighbor," called Hector from next door, raising his coffee mug in salute. "Welcome to the future." Mark grinned, giving a thumbs up. The installation team had just left, and the system's monitoring app already showed power generation beginning. A perfect blue sky October day, ideal for a solar debut. "Your daughter would be proud," Hector added. "How's she doing at environmental science program?" "Thriving, top of her class," Mark replied, climbing down the ladder with care. "Says she's going to save the world, starting with dear old dad's carbon footprint." He was rolling up the extension cord when a silver Mercedes SUV screeched to a halt in front of his house, the aggressive parking job leaving tire marks on the pristine suburban street. Out stepped Cheryl Wilkinson, newly elected HOA president, designer sunglasses perched on her highlighted blonde hair. Her crisp pantsuit and pearls seemed excessive for a Tuesday morning. 4 neighbors had already nicknamed her HOA Karen in their private neighborhood group chat. "Excuse me," she called, her voice carrying across 3 lawns as she marched up his driveway uninvited. Were those modifications approved by the committee? The installation team had barely been gone 20 minutes. Mark wondered how she'd found out so quickly. Before Mark could answer, she was already punching furiously into her tablet. "No application on file. This is a clear violation of Covenant Section 14.3. I submitted paperwork 3 months ago," Mark explained, pulling out his phone to show the confirmation email. "I have receipt number HOA 2023-587. I followed up twice and was told it was in process." Cheryl's perfectly lined lips formed a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "If you didn't receive explicit written approval, there is no approval. The committee meets quarterly to review all aesthetic modifications. Black panels on a sand-colored roof, obviously inappropriate." She tapped aggressively on her tablet and thrust it toward him. "I'm issuing a 7-day removal notice. After that, it's $200 per day in fines." "That's ridiculous," Mark protested, feeling his face flush. "These panels are barely visible from the street. State law protects homeowners' rights too." "State law doesn't supersede our covenant that you signed, Mr. Jensen," she interrupted. "Oak Ridge Estates has maintained property values precisely because we don't allow ISOs." As she strutted back to her vehicle, she called over her shoulder, "The Oak Ridge Estate standard is excellence, Mr. Jensen. Solar panels are simply tacky, like plastic flamingos or clotheslines." She slid into her SUV, adding loudly enough for the gathering onlookers to hear, "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in one of those eco-villages." Later that evening, Mark's phone buzzed with texts from 5 different neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation. The group chat erupted with sympathetic messages and shared tales of Cheryl's reign of terror. The final message was from elderly Mrs. Patel across the street. "She made us repaint our house twice. Be careful. She's on the Historical Preservation Committee and the City Council. She has friends in high places. My son is an attorney. Call him tomorrow. This isn't right." Mark stared up at the ceiling, calculating the cost of removal and the potential legal fees to fight back. His daughter's photo smiled at him from the nightstand next to her handwritten note. "Thanks for being the change. Dad, love you." The solar company workers arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, their faces grim as they prepared to dismantle the system they'd proudly installed just 8 days earlier. Mark had called Mrs. Patel's son, an attorney who specialized in property law. But the news wasn't good. While state law did protect solar installations, the HOA had a 6-month grace period to update their bylaws to comply. Fighting now would cost thousands with no guarantee of success. "I'm really sorry about this, Mr. Jensen," said Dave, the lead technician, as he carefully disconnected the first panel. "Third removal this month because of HOAs. It's like they're at war with the sun." "You're keeping them, right?" asked his partner Luis. "Maybe someday." Mark nodded, watching $22,000 worth of cutting-edge technology being detached from his roof. "They'll be garage ornaments for now." From her driveway across the street, Cheryl monitored the removal operation, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes but not her smug expression. She occasionally took photos with her phone, documenting compliance. Mark imagined her creating a PowerPoint presentation for the next HOA meeting. "How I maintained neighborhood excellence." When the last panel came down, she gave a small, satisfied nod before sliding into her Mercedes and driving away, presumably to her Tuesday spin class that she'd mentioned 3 times at the last community potluck. The workers helped Mark carefully store the panels in his garage. Dave handed him his business card with a personal cell number scribbled on the back. "When you figure something out, and smart guys like you always do, call me directly. No reinstallation fee." That evening, as Mark sat dejectedly on his back patio nursing a beer and scrolling through solar installation forums for ideas, a knock at his back gate surprised him. Hector stood there, but he wasn't alone. Nancy from 2 doors down and Michael, who lived on the corner, stood with him, all fellow homeowners who'd had run-ins with Cheryl. "Neighborhood watch meeting," Hector said with a wink. "Official HOA business." Mark ushered them through the side gate rather than the front door, aware that Cheryl had installed a doorbell camera facing the street for community safety. "We saw what happened," Nancy said once they were seated around his patio table, her voice low despite being in a private backyard. A retired school principal, she'd had her application for native plant landscaping rejected 3 times. "It's outrageous, and we want to help." Michael, a retired attorney who'd previously tangled with Cheryl over the height of his garden fence, placed a thick folder on the table. "I've been collecting information on state laws that supersede HOA regulations, particularly regarding sustainable energy initiatives. There's a loophole here we can exploit." He adjusted his glasses and opened the folder to a highlighted paragraph. "It's all about classification." "Classifications?" Mark asked, leaning forward. Hector grinned. "That's where I come in. I happen to work for the county permit office. Did you know that garden structures under certain height and square footage don't require HOA approval if they serve a primarily agricultural purpose?" Nancy tapped the table excitedly. "And I've been researching vertical gardening systems for the community center. Solar-powered irrigation is considered an agricultural necessity under County Code 47.3. For the first time in days, Mark felt a spark of hope ignite. "I think I need to become a gardener," he said, reaching for his laptop to begin researching vertical gardens and solar integration. A serious, technical, agricultural innovator. As his new allies gathered around his kitchen island, plotting their next moves, Michael with legal precedents, Nancy with garden designs, and Hector with permit requirements, Mark realized this had become more than a fight about panels. His daughter's voice echoed in his head. "Systems only change when someone challenges them, Dad." This was about standing up to petty tyranny, one solar-powered tomato plant at a time. 3 weeks later, residents of Oak Ridge Estates witnessed unusual activity at Mark's property. Delivery trucks arrived with mysterious materials, wheelbarrows crisscrossed his yard, and a small excavator dug trenches along his property line. The Neighborhood Watch app buzzed with speculation. Was he building a pool? A greenhouse? An underground bunker for the coming apocalypse? Mark had taken 2 weeks of vacation time, working from dawn until dusk alongside Hector during evenings and weekends. They'd filed for all the proper permits under Hector's expert guidance, carefully documenting every step with photos and paperwork. What emerged was far more interesting than neighborhood gossip had predicted, a striking agricultural support structure surrounding his new vegetable garden. The vertical panels, now artfully arranged as a modernist fence, gleamed in the sunlight at carefully calculated angles. Between them, climbing vegetables and flowering vines were already beginning to grow on custom trellises. "It's beautiful," gasped Nancy, who'd stopped by with a casserole on the pretense of being neighborly. "How much power does it generate like this?" "About 75% of what roof mounting would provide," Mark explained, showing her the monitoring app on his tablet. But combined with the battery storage system hidden under the garden shed, it's enough to run my home essentials and the entire garden ecosystem. He'd integrated the system with smart irrigation controls and efficient LED grow lights that automatically illuminated the garden in the evening, all powered by the solar panels themselves. Underground sensors monitored soil conditions, and small pumps circulated water through a Japanese-inspired stream that doubled as rainwater collection. But Mark's masterstroke came through Michael's legal connections. He'd partnered with the local university's Sustainable Agriculture program, officially registering his yard as a community demonstration garden for suburban food production research. The university agreement came with additional legal protections and a small grant that offset some of his costs. Mrs. Patel's grandson, a social media influencer with an environmental focus, had created a slick website documenting the project's development. Within days, a local news blog picked up the story, praising innovative approaches to suburban sustainability. The inevitable confrontation came on a Saturday afternoon. Mark was hosting the first of his scheduled university tours, 6 graduate students and their professor examining his irrigation system, when Cheryl's Mercedes pulled up. Her high heels sank awkwardly into the lawn as she stormed over, violation clipboard in hand, Kate's spade purse swinging fiercely at her side. "This structure was never approved," she began, barely acknowledging the students taking notes. "Section 17 clearly states that." Mark calmly handed her a thick envelope he prepared for this moment. "These are my agricultural structure permits from the county, the university partnership documentation, and a letter from State Senator Williams commending neighborhood sustainability initiatives." He paused for effect. The senator would love to feature our community in her next newsletter about green innovation. The blood drained from Cheryl's face at the mention of the powerful senator, known to be a key ally for her husband's business interests and campaign donations. "I've also taken the liberty of organizing a neighborhood garden party next weekend," Mark continued pleasantly. "We'll be serving produce from the garden and demonstrating how the system works. The local news will be covering it." He smiled his most genial smile. "We'd love to have you say a few words about how Oak Ridge Estates supports sustainable initiatives." Cheryl glanced at the students now openly watching the exchange, one filming with her phone. She flipped through the permits, searching desperately for a violation. Trapped by her own political ambitions and the witnesses, Cheryl forced a brittle smile. "How wonderful," she managed through gritted teeth. "I'll check my calendar." As she click-clacked her way back to her car, one of the university students whispered, "Was that the HOA Karen you told us about? Epic takedown, dude." Mark simply smiled and resumed the tour, pointing out how the solar panels provided precisely the right amount of shade for his heirloom tomatoes. The quiet victory felt sweeter than any confrontation could have. Mark's garden party exceeded everyone's expectations. What he planned as a modest demonstration evolved into a community event when 47 neighbors attended, along with 2 local news crews, a representative from the State Environmental Agency, and, most surprisingly, 3 members of the City Council who'd heard about the project through Senator Williams' office. Cheryl arrived precisely on time, wearing a forced smile and a suspiciously green pantsuit that Mark suspected had been purchased specifically for the occasion. She positioned herself strategically near the city officials, championing the neighborhood's commitment to innovative sustainability as if she'd personally approved Mark's project. His innovative design, soon dubbed the Solar Garden by a local sustainability blog, became a talking point across the county. The university expanded their partnership, adding a small weather station and soil monitoring equipment that transmitted data directly to their agricultural research center. Elementary school teachers requested field trips, and 3 different gardening clubs scheduled tours. The unexpected twist came when property values in Oak Ridge Estates began to rise. Real estate agents started highlighting proximity to the award-winning Sustainable Demonstration Garden in their listings after Mark's design won a Regional Environmental Innovation Award and was featured in a national gardening magazine. The Jensen method became shorthand for suburban solar integration, and Mark found himself fielding calls from homeowners around the country, dealing with similar HOA restrictions. He started a weekend consulting service, donating the proceeds to a scholarship fund for environmental engineering students at his daughter's university. At the quarterly HOA meeting, Mark arrived early, but found the community center already packed. Several homeowners presented a petition with 78 signatures to update the community guidelines to specifically allow and even incentivize sustainable modifications. The room fell silent when Cheryl began to object, until Robert Hamilton, the community's most influential resident and biggest HOA dues payer, cleared his throat. The retired tech executive rarely attended meetings, letting his considerable financial contributions speak for him. "My company is pivoting heavily into green technology," he announced, his deep voice carrying authority. "Having our neighborhood recognized as a leader in residential sustainability would be advantageous." His meaningful look at Cheryl spoke volumes about the political and financial realities at play. Of course, innovation has always been the Oak Ridge spirit. Cheryl quickly pivoted, tapping her gavel, all in favor of the Sustainable Initiatives Amendment. The vote was unanimous. 6 months later, Mark stood in his thriving garden, harvesting heirloom tomatoes grown with solar-powered light and water. His daughter had come home for spring break specifically to see the completed project. Together they were recording data for her senior thesis on suburban agricultural systems. "Dad, this is beyond what I imagined," she said, gesturing to the 7 similar systems now visible in neighboring yards. "You didn't just install solar panels. You changed an entire community's perspective." Mark handed her a perfectly ripe Cherokee purple tomato. Sometimes the best solutions aren't about fighting the system head-on. They're about finding a creative path around the obstacles. His phone buzzed with a notification from the neighborhood app. Someone had posted a photo of a A4 SAAE sign in front of Cheryl's house. The caption read, "Looks like our HOA Karen is relocating to a more traditional community in Arizona. Anyone planning a goodbye party?" Mark's daughter laughed when he showed her the post. "I'm guessing no tomatoes from our garden in her goodbye gift basket." "Actually," Mark replied thoughtfully, "I think I'll bring her our best ones, along with information on desert-adapted solar systems. After all, every community needs someone willing to lead change." He smiled as he pocketed his phone and continued harvesting his sun-powered crops. The solar panels, once rejected from his roof, now stood as the gleaming backbone of a community transformation, proof that sometimes the most powerful change happened not through confrontation, but through stubborn creative persistence that made the old rules simply irrelevant. As he looked across the neighborhood at the new array of solar gardens spreading like a quiet revolution, Mark realized he'd built something far more valuable than energy independence. He'd built a blueprint for change that others could follow. And that was the most renewable resource of all.